Hello, everybody. Welcome back to You Can't Win. This is Tom here, and I'm joined by Don as usual. And we're joined today by our good old friend Alex. He's back again, and we're going to be discussing, well, the obvious. The big change in the news is that we have a new president-elect in the United States, Joe Biden. Joe Robinette Biden. We'll be talking about that and trying to stay away from kind of like the hyper punditry and just sort of like getting some first impressions and I don't know, just sort of like some conversation around that. For my part, I am very disappointed to see that yet again Americans have voted to have a president. I was really hoping we could avoid this once and for all, but you know, Bernie died, Trump's going to jail, and you know, Biden is retarded, and yet still we have managed to find ourselves in this position once again. So, you know, it's not up to me though. It's none of my business. But here we are. Anyway, so how are you guys feeling about this?
Kind of the way you are. You know, it would have been great if we could have just skipped it all, but I thought it was going to end up just about like this, where it would be more narrow than, you know, than the poll showed, and it did. And it was kind of exactly what they said was going to happen. It's going to drag on for days. And Trump's going to say he didn't lose. You know, it kind of went the way they said, and it was, you know, not fun.
Yeah.
It shouldn't drag on this long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as a Canadian, seeing, well, even just the ballots and stuff, all that stuff, it's very strange to us seeing, like, dozens of names on them and all different offices and, like, ballot measures and all this kind of stuff. And then it taking... You know, and then it's always like some sort of strange machine. It's not just like we just, you know, most times when I vote, I just use like a pencil or, you know, and just like mark an X on one name out of like 5 names. And that's my job for 4 years or something kind of thing. Right. But like, I don't know. So it's very strange seeing all these things going on about like, it's like you put it into some sort of vote harvester and then it feels like a Mickey Mouse operation or something. So, yeah. I don't know, which is why, you know, I'm pretty sure it was stolen from Trump.
Well, that's the thing. We've never really known how any of these elections work. So, you know, you could think we're all, you know, it could all be run out of, you know, the CIA. That wouldn't, you know, and you would never know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen a vote. Have you guys ever seen a vote?
Yeah.
People talk about these things. I've never personally seen one. How do we know they're actually real? You know?
Yeah. So that's one thing, Alex, is that neither Tom and I voted. So did you vote?
I did vote. I went ahead and I pulled the lever and I voted straight ticket Democratic.
Okay.
For the first time, I did not vote, even though I was eligible for Barack Obama or in any of those by-elections. I did vote for Bernie earlier this year.
Yeah.
But I had not pulled the lever before. And I was sick of having the Republicans in charge. Yeah. I can't, you know, have any confidence going forward, but you know, I was sick of them. I've never really liked them. You know, I've had a lot of criticisms of the Democrats and the left in general, but I was sick of them. You know, part of it is really the environment stuff. You know, I like the environment. That's something that, you know, it's interested me for a long time. And, you know, I think that the Democrats are a little bit better. You know, sometimes the Republicans, you know, they're not always right. I don't think they're right on nuclear power. And they're certainly compromised in that regard. But I thought, you know, let's see the other guys give it a shot for a little while.
Yeah. Do you expect anything to happen with the environmental stuff, like in you know, a little bit?
I think it's going to be very minor stuff that Biden can just do himself. I think that there had been some Trump reversals on that policy around the Clean Air Act stuff.
Okay.
But I don't think anything went through Congress. I think it was all executive fiat. So I believe that there's going to be marginally more attempts at carbon regulation. But it's not, you know, carbon regulation itself really isn't enough. It's not really a plan to fix the energy system. It's just sort of a, aspiration that if we do this, it'll fix itself.
Sure.
And, I've actually been kind of happy with some of the things that have been going on in that regard, even regardless of Trump. Trump wanted to bring back coal. Coal is way down. It's going down and it's on the way out, basically. Mm-hmm. But, I think that there are a few things that would change in a very minor way. There may be some other things that I don't like that are going to go through, like a gun control bill. But, I would say the environment stuff is more important for me. Just as my big issue.
Yeah, didn't Trump defund the EPA pretty harshly? Did that stick? I remember when that happened.
I heard stories about that. I'm not totally I think that a lot of it was scare stories. They were saying like, he's not going to fund any studies about the climate, and it's just going to be, the end of the world. But I haven't really noticed any difference. Maybe there's some climate scientists that could be like, no, I lost my job over that. It really sucks. But I don't think that ended up being a big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it will be kind of nice to, like Trump just left we left the Paris Agreement. I guess Biden's one of his promises is that we're going to get back in that for whatever, for whatever that's worth. I mean,
for whatever it's worth,
means,
that might be the least important part, because these things are just a whole bunch of posturing by, it's like being in the WTO, basically. It's
right.
It doesn't have any real effect. Well, actually, the WTO has more effect. The WTO can sanction you. I just mean it's like being in the WTO in that, like, why would you care?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it just commits you to targets that you can ignore. I don't know. So, yeah. I don't know. I think that Canada, that's going to be the main, the main sort of upshot for Canada stuff is that you probably see like Trudeau and Biden and a few other countries like Macron and stuff like, being like, internationalism is back, and then a lot of like really weird little treaties and stuff, like little agreements trying to make it look like, I don't know, the whole world has become progressive again or something, but we'll see.
And I guess, there'll be the benefit of, Europeans and Canadians are going to like us again.
Yeah.
They haven't liked us very much when we had Trump.
Yeah.
And they all, even in like Poland, which has a pretty right-wing government, I think they all like hate Trump, or maybe just slightly less than in France or Britain.
Yeah. I think Poland was one of the governments that said they refused to recognize Biden. They're recognizing Trump as the actually elected.
They went that far? They're recognizing Trump?
I see some tweet. It's from some like Pepe guy. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah. Oh, well, look, maybe we'll get a chance to talk about those guys, because it's been fun watching the reaction.
Yeah. I was really expecting post-election Twitter to really stink, but it's been awesome. We had the first night. Trump looks like he was winning. That was really fun to see everyone crying about the polls and everyone declaring victory for like based God Emperor Trump. Got to have one night of that. The next day it switches and everyone, it's the complete reversal. So I got the best of both worlds. Both sides are crying and I'm just like on cloud nine.
It was good. It was good. If you're watching the people that are losing, if you're watching, the general discourse, I thought it was pretty abysmal. But then every once in a while would just come up and be like, if Trump wins Arizona, they shouldn't have called that, right. And if he wins this and he wins this, it's like, oh, so that's how we're doing it. We're in the bargaining stage here.
Yeah.
And then it just got quite insane. But we can talk about that later.
Sure. I guess one thing that's kind of interesting, I wasn't expecting to feel this way, but it's kind of nice to have a sense that they're just the whole weird mirage of like fake news in the sense that like you can't trust anything, like everything is just a scam and bullshit. Like it's sort of nice to feel like that is dissipating a little bit, and it's sort of back to your standard like CIA propaganda kind of thing. You know what you're getting. you know who's the bad guys and stuff. It's not just like everyone is trying to like yank you this way and that. So I don't know. I kind of feel comfortable with that, at least in the right now. I'm sure that in a month from now or whatever. I mean, like that's not even going to be the Biden presidency at that point. But
yeah, I mean, maybe by the time this drops, maybe it'll be back to something even weirder.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, things are changing kind of rapidly.
I was really surprised at how hard Twitter came down on Trump and stuff. Like, and not only that, but like all the sort of people around in the like media ecosystem around Trump and stuff, they really have turned on him pretty quickly, a lot of them. And but even then, like I don't know, it's just a very strange thing.
It didn't take long at all, did it?
Yeah. It's very strange to just see all these labels on Trump's tweets, though. I don't know. I feel like, the age of mod stuff is getting worse, but we'll see what happens with, I don't know.
Yeah, with Kamala Harris in the background, in the shadows, she's kind of like, I don't know. I feel like that is the age of the mods, like ascending.
Oh, yeah. Well, she gives me real Patrick Bateman vibes. Do you agree? Like, I think the Chapo thing was that Pete Buttigieg was insane. She's way more insane than he is.
Yeah, she seems very like plastic people sort of a thing. Like there's like a slight delay whenever she like someone says something and she kind of registers, oh, this is my time to laugh. Like there's a slight half-second delay, and then she does like that weird like canned laughter.
Yeah. Did you see her speech tonight or no? A bit of it, or I'm assuming Tom didn't, but like
nope.
But,
oh no, I was asleep. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So
took a early evening nap. Because I'd woken up at 4 a.m. and I knew I was going to be on here. It's like, well, I got to fit that in there somewhere.
Sure.
So I didn't watch any of that. I don't really care what they said. I can't imagine it was anything and stuff. Did you watch any of it?
Well, so I saw a few seconds of it, and the thing that was notable was that she sounded like Xanax, like just or and. It sounded like she was giving a speech for like just random kind of stuff, like as if she was like at a fundraiser in San Francisco for like
she could have been selling you timeshares.
Yeah. And she was doing that thing too that Tom was mentioning, where she just kind of very, very deliberate, very careful in how she's speaking, even though she's supposed to be like the most excited she is in her life or something. Like, I don't know. So. Very, very strange. It's going to be weird. They're really, really pushing hard the whole, dream team stuff. So she's going to be like she called him and told him that they won or whatever, and then they kind of contrived this moment where it was like trying to look like we did it, like we're the team kind of thing. And yeah, that is going to get really annoying really fast. And I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But yeah,
the lizard people are back, baby.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Did you guys see the Biden speech the other night?
No, I didn't watch any of his speeches. I didn't watch any of their speeches, in fact.
I caught the Trump one and I caught the Biden one. The Trump one was pretty typical Trump, in the sense of like, we could have won, the fake news was lying, all that kind of stuff. Except he was clearly sort of like a little bit. He always, like, through his presidency, he's always kind of felt like that based quality comes from him being like one step ahead of everybody. Like he's sort of outplaying the people who have to kind of play by the rules, and now the rules are kind of one step ahead of him. So it was sort of like him being kind of like pathetic, and all those little tricks and that rhetoric that he deploys just wasn't working anymore. And that's just fun to watch, and
sure,
kind of him being like punished Trump is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But the Biden thing, there's something really weird about it. It was like at a parking lot that was full of Jeeps, like full of new like 2020 model Jeeps.
Really?
Like every single, very strange. And there's been a bunch of like conspiracy theories about that and stuff. I saw one that was supposedly showing that he was not actually at the event, that it was just a video that was shown on a large screen. And they kind of like, when they were showing this on like the kind of like the mainstream news, like MSNBC and all that, they were showing the venue and showing how like they're doing this thing in the cars. It's like a socially distanced kind of, like COVID safe sort of a thing. And then they cut to his speech, and it sort of like doesn't show you that it's just on the projection. And
so he's a hologram.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's true or not. That would be, I could believe it, but I also don't necessarily trust the source I got it from. I get all my news from the subreddit r/conspiracy, and that's where I saw that. So I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. It was a very weird speech. He did his typical like kind of like stuttering and kind of not being able to get through things 100%. But
it's it's really weird that he managed to get this far being completely just a terrible public speaker.
Yeah,
right. Well,
and he was not always this bad.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Whatever Hunter's been smoking, the good Chinese crack, I think maybe he's been giving some of that to old Joe to help him get through this campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's one of the main reasons I didn't watch. I probably should have watched the Trump speech, but I don't like watching Biden speak. He's not good at it. I would say that it's basically the dementia thing. That's really the only thing it can be.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you guys think he's going to make it 4 years?
He might not.
I don't think so. No.
I would say my guess would be yes. They'll give him whatever research drugs they need to keep him through it, but he basically wasn't there to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be really funny if he like died of COVID like the day before inauguration or something.
Yeah. Do you think
they do something like with Osama where it's like, we gave him a traditional Irish Catholic burial at sea, no video of the burial, it's just kind of a statement from the FBI or something.
Well, what does happen if he dies before inauguration day? Does Kamala become president, or does Trump?
Probably Kamala. I don't know, though.
I would think so. They voted for that ticket. That would be really funny, though, if that happened. If he just dies and it's like, oh, turns out, we read the election rules. Trump wins now.
Yeah.
Or actually, even better, if he doesn't die, but he just becomes so senile, like he's totally like just incapable of like speaking properly at all. Like they have to kind of do like a Weekend at Bernie's thing. Like they kind of like bring him up to the podium and like play something like recorded, like AI. His voice is all like AI generated and stuff.
Yeah. Do you think Trump's going to survive until 2024?
Yeah, he's healthy.
You have to imagine he's going to be back.
He beat COVID, man. He's invincible.
Oh yeah, and he's stronger now. Nanomachines.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. I don't know. I feel like he's on his way out. I feel like he's going to have that thing where, I don't know. I mean, I guess he could go either way. He could either be revitalized by leaving office, or he could end up being like, tweeting 2 years from now being like, if you look at the records in Philadelphia and stuff, like really, really, I don't know. And
he goes all Sam Hyde.
Yeah. Or like Howard Hughes, like just doesn't cut his nails, sits in the, in his like some estate, Mar-a-Lago, whatever, just goes like,
He does have the germaphobe thing already.
Sure. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
He was right all along.
Yeah. I think I for some reason I just thought that it'd be fun if he became an inventor. Like he started living in like something and being like, I've developed. He like becomes friends with Elon Musk, but just has bad ideas and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, him and Kanye, they start inventing stuff. He's designing, like shoes or whatever with Kanye.
Sure. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think he's still going to be around. And we really, it's an interesting time because we don't really know what's going to happen next.
Sure.
As far as politics goes. Probably not anything good, but.
Do you think that, I guess, this is kind of one of those, big things where it just, I kind of want your take on it, even though it is pretty straightforward, is like, do you think that the left is going to be, like the activist left kind of stuff is going to be stronger because of this, because they have like a easier someone more theoretically pliable that they can fight against, or is it going to be hurt because they don't have the big target of big bad Trump?
Well, I mean, I don't think that the activist left if you're speaking strictly like somebody who was, on the ground in the Black Lives Matter protests over the summer is going to have any real influence on, federal level politics here. But I think that kind of activist left stuff was so successful in the broader liberal culture that it's just kind of going to have an osmosis effect on all that stuff as long as Biden's in office. It's going to have effect on some of, if not necessarily the people who are at the top level appointments, it's going to have an effect on the broader culture of whatever's going on there.
Yeah.
And it'll probably have some influence informally.
Yeah. I've seen sort of a vein of like a stream of memes around like including like a Washington Post editorial that was like thank Black women for electing Biden and stuff, and a lot of stuff around that. And it's funny because I don't know if I heard that and I were a Black woman, which people can't see me, I'm not, but like if I heard that, I would just feel like that was the worst pandering. I don't know, like I would feel like really, really diminished by this idea that somehow you're a superhero for just because part of your demographic went one way or the other. I don't know. It just it seems such like a cheap thing, but I don't know. I mean, at the same time, there is that sort of thing where maybe I'm just, I don't know. Like the counter argument might be I'm so used to it in every other aspect of the world that like I just don't see it otherwise, Like,
right.
Just so used to turning on Star Wars or whatever and like having the white male hero or whatever, I don't know.
I mean, I guess that's a charitable reading of it, but I think a lot of that stuff is a lot more cynical than that.
Sure.
It's hard to even separate at a certain level. Like, I don't necessarily disagree with that sentiment. And I think even, probably a lot of more based guys than I, could sympathize with, be like, oh, I'm a woman. I don't have enough role models in a general sense.
Yeah.
But I think at this point, that kind of thing has become so politicized and so linked into all these other political issues and cultural issues that it's hard to take anyone who says it at face value, that's really what they're concerned about.
I feel like a lot of stuff is actually directed at white liberals to make them feel like
I think so.
They're on the good guy team,
Yeah, for sure.
Which is like, I don't know if you really need to reinforce that message. I feel like they've internalized that pretty strongly. But that's the constant,
Well, that's what, that is, even if I think that Biden is maybe the better choice for very narrow reasons that are specific to me, I think it's kind of sad that Trump didn't get to win twice, because he really did have everybody in power against him, it felt like. Like, I'm sure that there were a lot of like oil and gas companies that really loved Trump, but if you turned on the TV, like we were saying before, like it doesn't even seem like the Fox guys even are on his side anymore.
No, there was some stuff I saw about people like actually in the White House are already like abandoning ship, and they're just like, all right, see you later, man.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where I think the further away we get from the vulgarity and the entertaining parts, the more clear it will become that like the mainline stuff, like tax cuts and all the basic things like in judges and all that will become more clear. I think that he was just like a standard conservative on a lot of that stuff. But because the sort of like weird NGO networks and political campaigners and all that, they were shut out in a lot of ways, and a lot of these strange like carnival acts were brought in. I think that is really the main. You're right that's kind of like that's where a lot of the grievance with the elites came from. Like it wasn't really a lot of the policy stuff. It was more, like it was more this the vulgarity and the sort of the refusal to pretend that things will get a lot better sometime soon, kind of thing. I think that Biden is good enough. Biden is good enough that he can kind of hint towards you that, look, I'll listen to you and maybe we'll do that, but probably not. That's kind of his, attitude with a lot of the stuff. Well, Trump is more kind of much more go away, basically, I guess, kind of thing. Like even someone like George W. Bush would, I always bring this up because I think it's so, it's something that like people that are too deep into politics stuff sometimes forget. When Bush went around campaigning in 2004, he would say stuff like, I will, I fought to expand Medicare. I'm a big believer in, No Child Left Behind. I increased the education budgets and all that kind of stuff. Like, he was careful to at least signal on the big stuff that he was not hostile, like to like everything that liberals were sort of interested in, at least, kind of thing. Like he was very careful to push stuff like school charters and all that kind of stuff. But anyways, the point being that like, that is something that I think that the Republicans might be able to regain over the next 4 years or 8 years, maybe. And Democrats won't know how to respond to that. That's to some extent, they won't know how to deal with someone that is a bit better at messaging or whatever. So,
if they have credible spokesmen,
sure.
And I'm not sure the people that seem like they want to do that kind of stuff are necessarily those people.
Sure. Yeah.
It's kind of become like, I think that Trump was, he was kind of a vehicle for, and I guess for both sides, really. For Republicans, Trump was, kind of seemed like he represented the idea that the Republicans could make the changes that they wanted to government and society and, get something back for it and actually be able to be like, oh, we accomplished that. Whereas they really didn't get anything they wanted done under Bush unless you just, wanted to fight a war.
Yeah.
Like the whole, I was there for the Trump presidency and like the evangelical thing and the culture, the first round or, last round of the culture war over gay marriage, drugs, public morality kind of stuff. That just all went out the window very quickly, just like sand in their hands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's been kind of funny to think of, like, in a way, Trump has been the most progressive president we've ever had on those issues. If you just look at what has happened during his 4 years, I mean, whether that has anything to do with him is besides the point. It's just funny to think about like the Trump years being the most progressive, like, having the most progressive accomplishments on those specific issues.
Well, yeah. And for a conservative, it's like looking at that, it's like, oh my God, if you're a real social conservative, if that's, I don't know how many of those people there really are that aren't just, GOP people in general. Mm-hmm. But if you really were that kind of person, it would just be horrifying, watching over the decades as the GOP has done less and less and less on that. Maybe you would be like, oh, we're going to get rid of Roe v. Wade now, with the 6 Republican justices. But even that, like, you can drive to another state if they get rid of Roe v. Wade. None of that stuff is coming back. You can go to another state and get gay married. They get rid of that. That stuff is just, it's down the river.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, I don't know though. I think, and then Trump had that sort of, he gave that hint at least to people that he was somehow the bulwark against that changing, but I don't know if, I don't know. Even the stuff with, I'm glad that you kind of said also that the Supreme Court stuff is, I think that there's a lot of tendency to kind of overstate the importance of the social conservative elements of that in the moment because, I don't know. I think it sort of eliminates politics to some extent. I mean, that's what the Supreme Court in conservative things wants to do. It wants to try to take it out of the sphere of politics, but the idea that there wouldn't be a fight back that's effective and stuff, or to some sort of decision that was more restrictive, or, I mean, I feel like we have to, remember that things can be pushed either way. I don't know. I think that's one of the things that's kind of disappointed me with some of the, like, we're very negative on here a lot of the time about things, but I think people have been going a little too negative about how bad the Biden presidency is going to be, when it's just like, don't it's like take some lithium kind of thing, like even out a bit. It's gonna be okay. I mean, it's gonna be as pretty much the same. So if it's gonna be pretty much the same, it's like, well, okay, I
have seen a lot of stuff like, here comes the next war.
Yeah.
And that's something I've always tried to push back on, which is that I don't think there's going to be another war. I don't think there's an appetite for it really in the government. There's not an appetite for it in the public, and there's not an appetite for it in the military. So I don't think there's going to be one in the government.
Well,
not a serious war. There might be one of the, Grenada. I don't know.
But but even then, I think that the key with that is, if that's true, I feel like if you sort of extrapolate out a conservative outcome, or like a negative outcome in the future for that, what makes you different than just being a conservative or something like that on those issues? You know what I mean? It's like if you see a war looming and you don't think you have any sort of effective response to it, but you're still consider yourself a radical leftist or a leftist or whatever, I feel like it's like I just don't even know what the goal of being involved in politics would be at that point, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like it seems defeatist to start with. I don't know.
You're subject to politics even if you can't get anything you want.
Sure. Yeah.
Because
that's true.
maybe you wouldn't be interested in politics. And I have a lot of sympathy for that view. But politics is interested in you.
Yeah.
That's gonna affect what happens in your life, to some extent. I think that over this campaign I've become more pessimistic about politics in general, really getting anything we want in the short to medium term. Really anyone, if you have any sort of positive goals you're trying to achieve, I don't know, you might be better off, starting a business or joining a nonprofit if that's your thing. I mean, I don't really see a lot good coming out of it in general. And I guess that is kind of a conservative or defeatist approach, but I think it's realistic.
I mean, I think that's true. But I guess what I'm kind of getting at is this idea that, like, it seems, I guess I'm talking more about people that are actively involved in large groups in either like semi sort of leadership or, some sort of thing where they're asking other people to join them. And, I mean, for the three of us, we're not really, I don't know, we're kind of more observers of a lot of this stuff. But like when there's people
witnesses.
That are sort of like, witnesses, if there's like, when there's people kind of pushing their, I don't know, like when their organizational kind of forces and stuff, then I think it's a bit strange to then say, we're
like the
heading into a blender
line,
or something.
I hear you on that.
Sure.
I mean, you said it might make more sense to start a business. I think that's exactly what those people are doing.
They are in their own way. It's just not a business that's really going to help anybody.
Well,
they're getting into business.
It's on us to not be suckers. It's not on them to like be good guys or whatever. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And
that's fair enough.
Just a reminder to people that we have a $5 a month Patreon, which you can subscribe to and get our take on the issues. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was, you were talking about Biden not being probably as bad as people. I think people are sort of trying to, after being like, oh, it's so important to vote Democrat and all that stuff, I think they're trying to kind of swing back the other way and kind of show like, I'm still critical. I'm like a critical supporter. I'm not just a Biden head or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think there's a little bit of that going on.
Posturing, and there's a lot of pressure on people to do that kind of stuff too. be like, oh, I'm not just some idiot that watches MSNBC.
Right.
Because people will act like that. I'm sure, a couple, some of my more Bernie to Trump people, if any of them listen to this, they'll be like, oh, he's just a cuck. He voted for Biden. He should have been writing in Tucker.
Well, I mean, I was kind of feeling that Bernie to Trump style attitude going into the election. Like, I was starting to kind of want Trump to win just because
I was thinking of voting for him. I gave it a good thought. I'm like, maybe Trump's the better one. Maybe we just gotta, kick it all down.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I I totally see where you're coming from, and I was kind of feeling that. But then once it started to kind of be clear that Biden was winning, I was like, no, this is fine. This is actually good.
Yeah, I had a good feel. This is pretty much how I expected it to play out. I didn't realize it was going to go on this long, but I guess it was only 5 days, and it just felt like forever.
Yeah. I guess like once I started to kind of read what people were saying about all the write-ins and stuff, I kind of like assumed it would be like it wouldn't officially end until the end of the week, and that's I guess what happened. But I thought it would be a little bit more clear what was happening within the first couple of days, and that's really what was surprising, I think.
And it ended up being so close.
Yeah, it's something.
It's up there in the millions of votes, and it ends up being a few thousand, tens of thousands apart.
Right.
In several states.
Yeah.
So we could have been having a totally different conversation today.
Mm-hmm.
With just a different roll of the dice.
But I mean, I'm happy that it is the end of Trump. Like, it would have been, going into it, I felt like it would have been fun to kind of see more lib tears, lefty tears, and to have like the kind of like, just to kind of have that like gloaty Pepe feeling. But we got that for a night, and then it went this other way that kind of caught me by surprise, and I'm just happy with this now too. So like I'm just happy.
That brings us to the Trump guys, doesn't it?
Sure.
I want to talk about these people who, no knock on them, but they've been saying some stuff about this election, which is, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but they'll act like, everybody else is a sheep for not realizing it about, the vote totals coming in, and they've got some sort of math test that proves that the votes couldn't have come in this way.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of sad when you look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got to learn how to take an L sometimes. That's all.
Yeah, it happens. And, we knew that this was, and it's also kind of just, going a bit too far for Trump. He said he wasn't going to concede last election. He said he wasn't going to concede this election. And you're just kind of, doing a bit more work for him than you need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Basically, you're buying a little bit of your own supply, kind of getting high on your own supply a little bit,
Yeah, and
something like that.
I don't even necessarily begrudge some guy that sits around and posts on the internet, or watches football and logs onto Facebook and complain and says something crazy. I don't necessarily care about those people, but you have a lot of these like smart in quotes Trump guys, like Steve Saylor has been a big one. I keep seeing him popping up. He's mainly known for having very spicy views on race and IQ, and he's sitting there on his ThinkPad being like, these numbers just don't add up. And it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And the question is, how, I don't think that it's going to amount to anything in this election. There's not really anything Trump can do. There was some talk about, making him win anyway, even though he lost. That's not going to happen. None of that stuff's going to happen, but it's going to be like Russiagate, or it's going to be like it with the hanging chads, where a bunch of Republicans think, oh, he's not really president. And that's all it's going to amount to.
Yeah, it seems like there's this weird pattern now that I've noticed with a lot of these sorts of issues where things just kind of go the way they go, and people can make a stink and whatever about it, but it doesn't change what actually, like,
yeah,
it just is what it is. You can't actually change anything. It's just going the way that it's going to go. So,
Well, and it's a problem because people will refuse to just acknowledge reality in that respect. And, people can't accept that their guy lost anymore.
Right.
They have to come up with some sort of thing where, their guy didn't lose.
Yeah, maybe it's less that things are kind of just on these train tracks that no one can change, and it's more that people are just like, there's more crying about stuff. There's just a lot more like, no, this can't be true kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think we're going to get a lot more of these kind of pseudo conflicts over stuff that is really irrelevant to anything. It's kind of a problem that people have made up, like, Russia hacked the election, the ballots are fake, and it's just going to further and further the division in political life and make it less and less likely that we're going to get anything positive out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. I also noticed that, like, there'll be sort of like eruptions of like discourse that happen where people are really, really focused on something. And then it sort of reaches this point where some sort of collective decision happens just by, it's heavily influenced by, the people that have actual power, but like it reaches some sort of decision, and then it moves on, and almost everyone moves on completely from it to some extent, where I keep thinking about like the Tara Reid stuff with Biden and stuff where
oh my god, that is the craziest story of the year.
Where like you had people like AOC saying stuff like, she deserves to be taken seriously, we need to look into this and stuff, and then the second that it was close, the second that Biden was the presumptive nominee, all of that went away, basically, like just instantly. So,
and I think there was very good reason to be skeptical about it too.
Oh, really?
Once the information came out on it. I know a lot of people don't like Michael Tracy for kind of being a hot take guy online, but he wrote a good article about, this whole saga, and there's so many weird inconsistencies in it. Like, there's not necessarily a lot there, and there's reason to be skeptical of Tara Reid.
Huh, that's interesting. I didn't look too much into it. I just kind of assumed that there was some legitimacy to it, hashtag believe women and all that. But anytime you have this kind of accusation against like a political, like it's obviously like a political issue, I guess it deserves a little bit more scrutiny.
Like, I'm struggling to remember the exact details, but it's like she did work in the Biden, she worked as a Biden staffer, and she had told her mother or some other confidant that she quit over some sort of sexual harassment thing, but there was no accusation against Biden at the time. And then later, she was one of the people that accused Biden of, or either credibly, of sniffing her or something like that.
I'll believe that.
and then it morphed into, he sexually assaulted me.
I see.
And there's really no evidence of that going back. If it was real, this was the first time she told anyone, and she had already accused the Biden or the Biden staff of things in the past, and she I found the article convincing insofar as that I was not as sure that this was something that we had to take seriously anymore. She seems like I guess they always attack the character of, people who do this stuff, but she seems like a really strange person. She's been in a lot of legal disputes. Her name isn't really even Tara Reid. She's like changed it 2 or 3 times.
Weird. Why would you change it to like a famous actress's name that is spelled differently? That's odd.
Yeah, that's weird. And, and she says that it's because her husband is stalking her or something like that. But as far as it seems like he wants to have nothing to do with her, and this has all been involved. There was like a fight with her in a divorce, and again, I'm struggling to remember the details, but I find it, when I read that, I was like, oh, this is really weird. I don't know why this was taken so seriously, and why, we didn't know any of this stuff. We just kind of heard like, oh, Tara Reid, and then it went away. And maybe it went away for a good reason.
But
who knows, right?
Yeah. But that's the thing, is that I don't know, the way that these things happen. That's the thing that interests me. I mean, to be honest, it's like I'm more interested in the meta sort of part of it, where it's like the way that those decisions are made collectively. Like the same would be like, another example would be like Russiagate stuff, or some stuff around that with the impeachment proceedings and stuff, where they go hard on a certain angle, and then the second that it doesn't pan out how they want or whatever, it gets to the point where in the DNC, like, where they were talking about Biden and stuff, I don't think that they mentioned it many times at all, right? Like that, I think that they just kind of left it aside, that kind of stuff, even though for a long time it was like their number one issue. That sort of like collective decision to sort of shut out this whole elements of discourse is interesting to me, because I think that's a lot of what these cultural sort of debates will end up looking like.
Yeah,
in different ways.
It's going to date itself very quickly.
Yeah, and I think that's where, especially with Biden Harris, that's where they're going to put a lot of their focus will be on things where they can do something that sort of like has the valence of being progressive, but doesn't touch the sort of coalition they're trying to build of that includes like moderate suburbanites and all that kind of stuff. Like they're trying to find ways of just signaling to people that to get the memes on Instagram and stuff like that, right? Like where they forgive student loans for people that start small businesses in minority neighborhoods or something like that. But then,
my God.
Stuff like that.
That is a crazy statement. And
yeah.
Oh, I think, and they had to be there for 3 years too.
Yeah.
And it was so specific. It was Pell Grant recipients who started a business in a minority community for 3 years.
Yeah, it kind of reads like her cousin, like she had someone specific in mind that she wrote that for,
Yeah. And I think that's going to be interesting to watch. It will be that like, that signaling kind of stuff that will happen, where it'll be like a lot of the Hollywood movie kind of stuff, where it's like we're the ones making the changes that are going to benefit the community and all that stuff. And, isn't it great? I don't know. I remember stand-up comedy in 2009, I think, was probably one of the worst years for it, because you had people like Patton Oswalt and David Cross and stuff going out there being like, isn't everything amazing now and stuff? Like, isn't the world so good? At the peak of like people losing their houses and all this kind of stuff, they're going out there being like, we're living in the perfect timeline and all that, and I don't know. So I feel like we might get a bit of that this time still, even though people should know better. I don't know.
SNL is going to be horrendous.
I don't know.
Well, if it's been horrendous, so
yeah.
I mean,
that ship has sailed. It's late season Simpsons now.
I think we're gonna see a new level that's just gonna make this stuff look like nothing. I don't. Although, what's his face? John Mulaney went on there and talked some shit about Biden and how it's just all the same kind of stuff. That I don't know what that was about. That was kind of interesting. And they had Bill Burr on there, and I think they kind of knew what they were getting with Bill Burr.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that.
Bill Burr was great on there. It was really funny because he was. You couldn't say that he was like against any of the left kind of liberal things. Like he was clearly like from the side of like BLM is good, all that. He wasn't, criticizing it, but he was saying stuff about it that was making the people in the audience uncomfortable. So it kind of
that's great.
It kind of bombed in a way, but it was one of the. I mean, Bill Burr is the best at this, where he kind of is bombing, but it makes makes it better, and then it I don't know, he digs himself out of that hole really, really well.
I think he was using jokes from his 2019 special. Like, I think he sort of borrowed some of the material from that for that, and sort of toned it in a different way, where it was like, in the special, he kind of is much more opens up being like, complaining about woke people and all that kind of stuff. But I think that he kind of cut to the chase maybe in the SNL stuff and got right to that point of, making the liberals uncomfortable in a way that doesn't give them much ammo to attack them. I don't know. But the other thing I keep thinking about is, it keeps running through my head, is that Paul Mooney had a special where he was talking about Obama winning, and then he kind of goes on like a story about, being disappointed in Obama over time and all that. And but he had this thing where he said that, like, when Obama won, he was like running out in the street in Harlem just yelling, "Obama, beat your mama," and stuff, and just getting all like flipping out, being like, "Our beautiful black president," and stuff like that. So I don't know. I keep thinking that, like, Obama beat your mama, seeing these people like out in the street, but it's for like Biden. Just kind of like, I don't know, like,
and that seems to be happening, isn't it?
yeah. I don't know. So we'll see what happens, but yeah, I don't know. It's going to be a weird year, I think, of like people feeling their way through comedy and trying to figure out what to do with it, So
yeah, I'm going to miss COVID. They're going to shut that down on the first day.
Yeah.
Going to end the quarantine. Back to regular old black and white life.
Yeah. January 20th, 2021, they'll give out they'll be like, "Oh no, we've had this vaccine since, for a year. We've just been sitting on it because we didn't want to give it to Trump, I don't know.
Couldn't trust it in Trump's hands. He would have dropped it or something."
Yeah. So
yeah, that first day, I'm going to like step outside my apartment and the bright sun is just like in my eyes. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think it's going to be fun to see all the jubilation kind of fade a little bit as people realize, like, oh, wait, shit is really bad. And this is not solving anything.
Yeah. It's going to get... The economy's terrible. There's the coronavirus. It's not going away, and we're probably in for a whole lot of hurt.
A lot of this stuff is not Trump's fault in particular. He's not been good about handling it, but it's not like Biden is going to be very good about it either. And it's not like anybody can do anything about it. Yeah, and now you can't blame him in that same way. You can't be like, "Oh, look at the stupid orange guy." Like, okay. Now you got what you wanted. Like, it's not. Let's see how this works, guys.
Well, you say that, but he can absolutely turn around and be like, "Oh, it's Trump's fault. He was president, started under him, and that's what's going to happen. And it's going to be a whole ridiculous fight over, nothing."
Yeah,
you're not. There's no way out of the problems we're in. No clear way out. It's not like if we did even if it's like, oh, we did rent forgiveness. It's not like that would solve the economic problem we're under. There's not any clear, left-wing policy you could just slap in there. I don't know. You could be like, well, let's nationalize everything and have communism now. But that's not a real political proposal. It's not going to happen.
Sure. To be honest, I don't even know if that would really... I mean, that would be a radical change. There would be huge, that would have a lot of positive benefits and probably some negative consequences as well. But I don't know if that would even solve everything. We got a lot of problems.
Well, you had the Soviet Union and all that. That didn't work out all that well. So,
yeah. One thing that people have been saying a bit that I think is probably true is that it does sort of bring up it adds to my fears about climate change, I guess I would say, where, we have this semi-unexpected shock. Like, it's something that, theoretically you should be saying, well, we should have known that a pandemic was going to come around someday and be better prepared. You can always say that. But, like, it's semi-unexpected shock. And, you've got maybe 10%, 20% of people are actively trying to undermine the problem kind of thing, having parties and all this kind of stuff or whatever. And you have a lot of conflicting, even the people in good faith, conflicting advice, conflicting problems, anyways. But basically the idea is that like, I can very much see climate change sort of showing up as a issue more and more where, things get worse and worse in terms of the environment. And it will be a situation where we all should have known what we should have done.
Yes.
To some extent. And then things will be really bad. And then we'll just have to be dealing with it. And the told you so part won't matter, right? Like the told you so part is going to be like, people that wrote books about climate change in the 1990s being like, oh, we're in this downward spiral now in certain respects, and cities. And,
nice book, asshole. Why didn't you kill some oil executive?
Why didn't you read Bill McKibben?
Really...
Right. Yeah.
If you really cared, blow something up. All right, we'll cut that part.
Well, I do think the problem with the comparison of coronavirus and climate change is that Corona hit like that. It just hit. There's Corona. We're all locked down. It's not going to be like that for climate. It's going to play out very slowly and agonizingly over decades. Mm-hmm. So I kind of don't like the term climate crisis, which is one of the ones that, I think like the Guardian uses. They call it like climate crisis or climate catastrophe. I think that those are like the favored terms for them now. And it's kind of different from a crisis. Coronavirus is definitely a crisis, but it's like the difference between coronavirus is a pandemic. Climate change will be more like an endemic disease. It's going to be something it's going to be like when we had to live with smallpox and malaria and all these diseases that occurred periodically and over a very long period of time caused a whole lot of suffering. So it's going to be I think that makes a big difference in how people perceive things. Because the coronavirus, even people who are totally opposed to these restrictions, in March, they were locked down. I saw what my town has terrible congestion, and I saw it go from, undrivable to nobody's on the roads. It was incredible. And I don't think that climate change, unless there's, unless it's much worse than we think, it's never going to be able to really motivate people's behavior or their perception of the world the way that coronavirus did.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Yeah.
Not in the immediate future, maybe over a very long time. It's gonna modify the way we see things and the way we behave.
Sure.
Can I float an idea by you guys?
All right.
This is, I'm guessing at maximum 10%, maybe 5% probability of this being possible. What if Elon Musk or some guy like that is actually able to pull something off where they can like launch missiles full of like liquid nitrogen into the atmosphere or something and just kind of pull something out of the hat that just like miraculously solves everything, is I don't know, like I feel like that's in the cards somewhere. Like
that's one of the things I spend a lot of time thinking about. I spend a lot of time looking up the ways that they propose to do that kind of stuff, and it's probably never going to happen because the only way you can really solve that problem in a long-term way and in a way that doesn't create a whole bunch of, like adding a bunch of carbon to your atmosphere causes a whole bunch of problems beyond just the climate change and beyond just the global warming that is. You would have to basically pull it out. You got to get the carbon out of the atmosphere. And that's very, very hard. It is energetically intensive. It takes a lot of electricity or other means of energy to do. So it's going to cost a lot of money however you do it, if you can do it at a reasonable scale. So there are schemes where you could keep the world from warming by putting something in the atmosphere, putting minerals on the ground that are going to absorb carbon, putting something on big cargo ships that will jet seawater into the air and create clouds. These are, these mad scientist schemes, which, maybe we should do, and it seems for climate change seems pretty bad. Maybe we should do something like that. But there will still be all sorts of other problems coming down the pike, even if we do that, and even if we keep even if we keep the temperature lower than it would be otherwise.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well,
there's never going to be a silver bullet.
Sure.
I see.
Well,
and
I don't want to shut down that, what if Elon Musk comes out? Yeah, that's a cool thought, but at the same time, it doesn't seem likely based on what we see right now. It seems like it's going to be very, very hard to do anything like that.
Sure.
And it's important. It's important to have that out there in the open so that people know that. Sometimes people I follow a lot of climate people, and they will often talk as though that kind of stuff is supposed to be the only thing we do, and maybe we don't have to cut carbon. Maybe we don't have to switch to renewables or whatever. And I don't really see that very much among anybody who knows much about the issue, but they are right that, yes, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, I'm not like a Musk fan or nothing. Like, I was just, because that would be really funny if he was able to do it. I was just like, what if he did it? That would be great.
I totally hear you. I feel it's just one of my, it's one of the things I care about.
Sure. Well,
where we go, it's important. I think it's important to emphasize that, because this stuff gets a lot of press in the kind of small climate circle, and that seems to be the consensus on it. And some people, I think, are actually too negative on it. They think we should not even think about that stuff at all, which I think is misguided. We know that there's so many bad consequences of raising global temperature that we should be willing to take some radical risks if it seems like we're going to get there. But or it can even be, you can the thing about putting the chemicals in the atmosphere, we're already kind of doing that just through industry. Like, it's sulfates, like SO2, that that's an industrial pollutant, and it gets into the upper atmosphere and it cools the planet. I think we should absolutely be thinking about, assuming we can get out the polluting industries that are doing that, all the coal plants, I think it comes from a number of sources, but mainly from burning fossil fuels. As we burn less fossil fuels, we should think seriously about replacing the sulfates that are coming from that, and going ahead and getting a little more temperature reduction from just artificially reintroducing them. Because people say, there's a big risk in doing that, which is true, but we're already kind of doing it. So there's no reason to think that doing it deliberately is going to be worse for the planet than doing it accidentally right now.
Sure.
Yeah, this whole thing about like it being more of a sort of rolling problem that's endemic and stuff. It reminds me of something that one of my economist professors used to talk about, where he got very angry, not angry, but he got concerned that like a lot of the debate around pension reform and like Social Security and things like that, people would like talk a lot in Canada about there being like a crisis, or the United States about like some sort of shortfall and how it was going to fall apart, and then we would all be bankrupted. We wouldn't be able to afford pensions and all this kind of stuff, right? And he would always, it was kind of funny because he was very relaxed about it, and then he would just kind of go, he's like, do people not realize that like you get old 1 year at a time? He was like, it's like, yeah, okay, maybe 15 years from now there might be a problem. We'll figure it out over 15 years. It's like, it's not really, that's kind of his thing with that. And I guess that is true to some extent with the, with these sort of rolling things where it will, if it kind of rolls on, then you can kind of think, well, yeah, but that gives us, to some extent, time to fix certain things here and there, at least. It's not,
I definitely agree with that. And I think that as you see more serious stuff happening with climate, you're going to get... Here's the thing. The reason that people will say it's a crisis is that we're going to miss a certain goal or a carbon budget if we don't take X action in X amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Which maybe they're right. Maybe, that's the way we should think about it, but that's not the way most people think about it. They're going to look at it as it's affecting them, and they're going to weigh the costs against the benefits, basically. Like I remember back during the 2008 recession, you could look at opinion polls, and like before the recession hit, it was like 70% of people said protecting the environment was more important than helping the economy, and then as soon as the recession hits, it flips. It's like 70% or 80% even say the economy is more important than the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of things are gonna happen if you try to do something that's really gonna restructure everything to fix the climate issue.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I don't think that a lot of these proposals to, not necessarily the Green New Deal, but more people are like, we have to totally restructure our lives. We have to stop producing energy or whatever to hit this goal. They're not really realistic because you can't impose that on people. The second you put that in place, people are going to be like, oh, you've completely turned my life upside down to fix this issue, which is 25 years off at the best.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not really going to work. But I think that we also won't get the worst scenarios where we never transition anything because it can always be put off.
Sure.
As it's already had some effects. We've already seen a lot of growth in particularly renewable power. There's more EVs, even though those aren't moving the needle very much in comparison to renewable power, but they're there. You can get them. I think that stuff is going to build slowly, and you'll be able to avoid the worst stuff, but we won't necessarily be able to get the radical action we might want to hit those goals of, say, 1.5 C or 2 C.
Sure.
Probably going to go over that, and maybe even at the end of the century, we're still going to be emitting carbon, and the problem it'll still be there.
Yeah.
Unless it's zeroed out, eventually the planet will warm, unless it's zeroed out, will warm indefinitely. And we'll get up into those really high temperatures that have very scary consequences.
Tom, do we have do you want to maybe move into some of the questions that we have from the audience?
Yeah, sure.
Relate to this? Or?
Let's do that. But
yes.
That's a good idea, but I have a question for Alex, actually. So here's a scenario. I want you to tell me how likely you think this is.
Okay.
Total climate apocalypse, like it's just a wasteland, across most of the earth, and like 90% or 95% of the world's population just lives in like Mad Max style, Fallout level post-apocalypse kind of thing. And there's like a small, group of people, like the elites that kind of built up these little like climate apartheid kind of bunker compound things.
Yeah, they're living in a missile silo or something.
Right, and they're just hooked up to VR like most of the day, and they just kind of live in like this paradisal sort of VR world. And we just kind of like scrap with each other over like little pockets of water and things like that on the surface. And then the real treasure is that we get one of these VR units. Like that's what it's not really about like rebuilding the world. It's just like we just kind of ultimately like want to get a VR get our hands on some VR for ourselves so that we can also kind of live in that world. Is that like, I don't know. What do you think of that?
That'll happen eventually. There's a lot of good Jack Vance novels that kind of have that in there. They got the, the dying earth kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's going to happen eventually, but it's not going to happen because of climate change. It's going to happen because, I don't know, the old gods or something like that. Things are going to run out, but the climate change,
That's kind of like it's like a Reza Negarestani thing where like Salafism is just like this flattening thing that turns the whole world into a desert, and the oil is the inside coming outside or whatever. You've read Cyclonopedia, right?
Yes. Yeah, and Reza's on Twitter now, and he will respond to you.
Yeah, we're mutual followers, actually.
Good. Yeah, he's a great guy.
He's interesting.
Really generous and smart, and willing to talk to you about anything. That's all gonna come true.
Right.
If you stretch out the time scales enough.
Sure. Yeah, I always just think about like the Sahara used to be green, the Middle East used to be covered in forest.
Well, here's
not that long ago.
Yeah. Well, here's one nice thing about climate change. Even in the high-end scenarios, one area that's going to get a lot more rain, or at least we think so. We don't have the rainfall patterns are not as certain as the temperature change, which already has a lot of variation in it. But we think probably the Sahel region of Africa, right there on the southern half of the Sahara, is probably going to get more rain. And that may be, that can also create floods and all sorts of other things. But it seems like that area, it's going to get greener. There's that.
Huh. That's interesting. In the Quran, it says that you plot and plan, but God is the best of planners. So we'll just have to wait and see what he's got in store for us.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. All right. So let's jump into these questions here. I sent out a little call for questions, so we got some specifically for you, Alex. So this should be fun.
Okay.
Okay. So the first one here is: how do we develop more cheap power in more places in a decentralized, non-polluting manner?
Renewables. That's based on that description, renewables. I'm not sure it should all be decentralized, though. I mean, I think of that as kind of it's an understandable commitment, but it may be better to have some things more centralized. And I think that, it's kind of a dialectic. The current situation is that what we do is, say, if you take California or another place, at least in the U.S., that is going heavily on renewables, they will also have to build gas power as a backup, because gas power has a very specific advantage that neither coal or renewables or even nuclear have, is that it's very dispatchable, which means that you can turn it on and off very quickly. So if there's a spike in demand, you can go ahead and turn it on very quickly and get that power to the people that want it. Renewables, you have no control over that at all. On coal and gas, it takes a long time to start up and shut down the plants, and they don't really do that. So I think as you are expanding this kind of distributed renewables network, which is not all that distributed, they have big wind farms and big solar farms. There's rooftops, solar and so much and stuff like that, but that's a small part. But that digression aside, you have the distributed relatively renewables, but you also have the gas coming in on the other end. And obviously the other problem with the gas is that it emits carbon, not as much as coal, but about half as much. So I think if you're talking about something that would do it perfectly, it's hard to say. I mean, you would have to have new technology, I would think, is the only way. If you want to keep the levels, at where they are and rising in places where it's deficient, you'd need small modular nuclear reactors, some way to do better geothermal, or some sort of breakthrough in storage technology, which may be like thermodynamically impossible.
I actually have a question for you. So I was listening to the Alex Jones episode of Rogan that he recently did.
Me too.
Right, and he was going on about clean coal, and I know that's like fake, but how fake is it complete fantasy? This idea of clean coal or whatever?
Clean coal is probably fake. You could do like 90 or 95% clean gas.
Really?
But it's not. Yeah, but it's not really clear if it would be economically viable. The problem with the coal is really it's more carbon. But there have been plants where they like, and there are plants now where they sequester carbon. Like I think there's a few in Scandinavia. There's one that operated in the U.S. and it's gone because it couldn't make money. But it's not technically impossible. But whether it is cost effective and if we can have a larger infrastructure and economy that can support it, it's really not sure. I think if you were talking before about Elon Musk fixes a problem. If there was a fix to the problem like that, it would be clean gas.
Okay. Yeah, because like Jones was saying that in Utah, there's like sources of clean coal that can power the entire world 1,000 times over for years, and that it burns so clean it only separates into like pure carbon and pure water.
That's nonsense. But the clean coal is what you can do is clean fossil fuels is. You burn the fossil fuels to make electricity, and then you capture the carbon somewhere, and you sequester it into an old oil field.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
It's something that's called CCS, carbon capture and sequestration.
I see.
And that is, a lot of environmentalists are totally opposed to it at all. But looking at the way that renewables have really taken off and become extremely cheap, I think that and the way they pair so well with gas, if you could actually do that, it wouldn't be the best solution. We would still have carbon being emitted, but it would be considerably better than the other options we have. At least short term. If we had a world that was powered by renewables and gas with CCS in 2100, that would be a good end to the climate story of the century, I would think.
Huh. Okay. And that seems a little bit less like extreme in terms of the kinds of reforms that are not, that need to be made like at a political, economic sort of level. If you're still using gas, like you're not taken from the wallet of like the elites, too bad. You know what I mean? You're still kind of they get theirs.
And I think that and I guess I'm duty bound to mention that they have been. Well, this kind of gets into a whole other can of worms, but let's just say there are many, many people that would dispute whether this is viable at all and whether we should even be talking about it. But I'll let them make their own case.
Okay, sure. Yeah, we got plenty of questions to get through, so let's keep moving here. Next one is true or false? Because there are no permanent resource scarcities, no resource limits, and no intergenerational equity, all most conservation efforts do is deprive existing populations from the advantages that exist in contemporary use of the resource base. So that's a bit difficult to parse. Do you understand the question there?
I do, and I think I accept a lot of the premises. What's the intergenerational equity?
I don't know.
And I'm not sure what that means. But let's say no permanent resource scarcities. I think that's true.
And no resource limits.
And then maybe at least in the short term, we're not going to run out of iron this century.
Right. Okay.
And what was the other one?
Those were the three. And so because of that, all that conservation efforts do is deprive existing populations from the advantages that exist in contemporary use of the resource space. So it seems like given those three premises, there's no point in conserving.
Okay. They're saying conserving non-renewable resources. Well, some resources are non-renewable. Obviously, fossil fuels are not very common in the Earth's crust compared to, say, iron. Obviously, you want to conserve those, even if you want things that are not just oil. You might want plastic. You would want to conserve those. But as far as like metals go, I don't think there's necessarily a reason that you would have to conserve. We should just use less zinc because we're going to run out eventually. Maybe
I don't think
zinc
people
might
are
be a bad
concerned
example.
about that.
Maybe
though,
zinc
right?
would run out in 5,000 years or something. I have really no idea. Well, and I guess that's the point. In the very, very long term, you could run into shortages for some of these resources. I kind of lean on the cornucopian edge of that stuff. I was talking about it with somebody earlier, where we don't have to worry about immediate resource shortages, but maybe in the long term, it would be better to conserve these things. Whether we should do it now, whether we should really we should use as little as possible, maybe not. I'm not sure, especially if you're talking about like international development. If people need a bunch of steel to build factories, go ahead and do it. But I think in the longer term, I think it's something that should be taken more seriously. But it's not necessarily relevant for any decision you would make today.
Yeah. So two things on this. One is that I'm pretty sure this question, it's like a facetious question that is making fun of cornucopianism. I think that's
probably true.
That's the angle. And then the other thing, though, is that we had a poster, a beloved poster on the Rizone that is named Mustang, who used to bring up a lot that scarcity of metals in renewables and stuff. and he would say stuff about
what's up, Mustang? Thanks for sending in the question.
Yeah. Like copper shortages and stuff like that. Like he thought that that the renewables would reach a limit of utility because you have to build solar panels and stuff. Do you believe that at all? Do you think that there's some... No?
It's total like nonsense, basically.
Okay.
I mean, and well, let's see. Obviously, we're not going to run out of the metals. Not anytime soon. If a very long term, thousands, tens of thousands of years, that could maybe hundreds if you're pessimistic.
Okay.
And the other thing people will say is like, I think this was the point of the Michael Moore movies, like, they just, if you build renewables, it emits more carbon than a gas plant would, which is just a joke, which is totally untrue and just confuses the situation.
Okay.
But obviously Mustang knows what he's talking about. We know that guy to be on the level.
I've played enough Civilization that I know that it's usually better to chop a forest than to keep it around for the long-term hammer bonuses that you get from it. So that makes sense to me. All right, let's move on to the next question. Is degrowth necessary to deal with environmental disaster? And do you have any thoughts on Thomas de Gregory? I'm not sure.
I kind of feel bad about neglecting the degrowth people. I haven't read Thomas E. Gregory. I don't know if he's good or bad. I've talked with what's his name? It's like Kallis, George Kallis, or something like that. He wrote a book about what it's like in respect of limits or something, which was the reviews I read of it were more interesting than I expected from degrowth people. He said he rejected a kind of Malthusian limits to growth idea, which is the kind of thing you got from the Club of Rome and the limits to growth report, which was said we're going to run out of minerals. If we don't, there's going to be too much pollution and everybody's going to die. So we have to institute limits to growth to prevent a Malthusian collapse. And you also had a lot of that in people like Paul Ehrlich. He had a more interesting idea, which is that we should have basically self-imposed limits. We should take less from, we should do things that are less environmentally intensive, because we'd like to conserve things like the natural world. And I have a lot of sympathy for that view. I'm kind of an old school environmentalist. I like, Sand County Almanac and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I think that is more of that's not necessarily something that you can expect everyone to subscribe to. Not everybody, you have to balance that with the material needs that people have. So I think that you can convince you can convince people to do meaningful changes at a level that is more than just sort of subcultural environmentalism where, you like going on hikes or whatever, on that basis. But I'm not sure it's the basis for a political ideology and a political economy. I have a lot of sympathy for it, as I understand it, at reading and trying to read it in a, what would be the word, a charitable light. But I'm not necessarily sure that's something you can balance with the economy, even if we assume the economy was a lot more egalitarian than it is right now.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's wrap up here with a comment from our favorite question submitter. In the end of the day, it seems Q was right all along. They were really after him. Alas, my white race, my beautiful race, what will it be of us? So, I don't know. Any comments on that, guys? That's not really a question, but...
the U.S. could embrace pan-Turkism.
Hell yeah, now you're talking
we could take back Karabakh. Mm-hmm. And we could establish a joint American and Azeri settlement of Karabakh, getting rid of all the Armenians, of course, and that could bring a new life to the United States under Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sounds interesting. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really feel like I have standing here to talk because I consider myself biracial, being white and Ukrainian. So, not really gonna, I feel like, we're the future, the mestizo. So, yeah.
It will be interesting to see what happens with the Q people. I've seen some people kind of talking about like when prophecy fails, the whole idea that when a prophecy like that fails, that people tend to double down, like the cult kind of doubles down on the prophet instead of, abandoning him because of his failure and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I can definitely see that being the case, that it works that way. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't think we're done with the whole like Trump Q kind of crazy thing. I think that's still going to be a vocal movement in the country for at least a year or so. At least.
And I think that politics will increasingly come to resemble that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you think about it as like the Tea Party kind of shifted into this has not been just like a flash in the pan. It's been a long time coming.
No. And the liberals have done their fair share of that stuff too, with all the Russia stuff and so on.
Yeah, and this kind of like the whole woke stuff has become a little bit cultish as well. You know, like it's gone a little bit beyond just like enthusiastic support for progressive policies or whatever. It's kind of like in some instances,
if it ever was, you know,
right. So,
sure,
yeah, fun times in the good old USA.
Sure. Yeah, well, thanks for coming on, Alex, again, and
thanks for having me on.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thanks for listening, guys. If you'd like a second episode of the podcast every week, you can subscribe to our Patreon for $5, and you'll get that as well as access to our Discord where you can chat with us in our community. If you want to send in anonymous questions, you can do so by heading over to the podcast Twitter account at YouCan'tWinPod, and you'll find a link to the Curious Cat pinned there, and we will answer your questions on the next episode. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next week.